Ahoy! Welcome to the Sea Captain Way podcast with Phil Bender and Greg Patton, where we help listeners navigate the uncharted waters of personal and professional growth.
The Sea Captain Way is about energizing top performers to take on risks and push beyond their comfort zone to pursue life-changing goals and achieve peak performance.
We're going to help you build your vision by showing you how to break free of boundaries that are holding you back.
So Phil, today we're delighted to welcome Jenn Quader to the Sea Captain Way podcast. Jenn is the president and CEO of the Smart Agency in Irvine, California. She guides the vision for the Smart Agency and oversees all aspects of the agency's operations. The firm is committed to advancing commercial real estate and financial services through effective communications. Her team helps companies tell their story more effectively to advance the built environment, deepen social impact, preserve stability, and build the next generation of great communicators. So welcome, Jenn.
Welcome, Jenn Quader. My gosh, it is so nice to see you. Recommendation from Chris George. A little shout out for Chris, who is a beloved part of the Sea Captain coaching family. And how exciting is this? And you know, I'm sitting as we dive in, the Smart Agency. It seems like such a blinding glimpse of the obvious to name something and put smart on it, because better than dumb. But you probably have a story behind that as well. But it's good to have you here. Welcome.
Thank you so much. I'm honored to be here. I've heard amazing things, and you guys bring up amazing leaders. So I feel very honored to be among the ranks of your guests. So thank you, and thanks to Chris George. And I will say that I think that naming your company the Smart Agency is a good example of a risk taker, because for a long time, because I thought, man, I'm either going to look like I have a really big ego, or they're going to know we have to deliver. And hopefully it's the latter.
Yeah. Well, yep. Truth be told, Sea Captain coaching, the Sea Captain doesn't have a boat. So, this is one of those things that you just have to understand.
Look, the captain he has every boat. He doesn't need a boat. The Sea Captain can do any boat. That's the whole thing.
I love you already. Let's get going.
She's already started the mutiny, and we're only a couple minutes in.
We planned this beforehand, Greg.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
So you started your career as a professional theater actress, where you spent years conveying stories through acting, singing, and performing nationally and even internationally, including national tours of Broadway shows. What was this experience like?
The best. It was amazing. It was cool and interesting. And I think you said before we got on, you said, Phil, that my life has been a little complex, and I think it has. But I think it starts in a really simple place, which is that I think one of the best things for relationships, for business, for anything is good communication. And I think that when you are raised learning to express yourself in whatever way you might express yourself, that is a beautiful way to grow up. So I was raised in a musical family, and then I took a job doing theater. And that's actually how I met Chris George. He also has a background way back before all of his luxury retail days. Mm-hmm. He also worked in theater. And so what I think it gave me was an ability to express myself and what I need. And then I think that that's really critical for what I provide to clients and what I provide to my company, because I can't just communicate at them. We all know that leaders can't just tell everybody what to do. I have to give them their own way to express. And so I think it gave me a framework to be able to figure that out.
I love that. And just for the record, complex, I didn't say complicated. That's not a good one. Complex is okay. But the communication is, again, communication, we talk about it all the time, Greg, is, when it's the other person's idea, boy, the ownership is so much higher, right? Mm-hmm. And so it's not, that makes total sense.
Yeah. Well, with your musical theater background, I'd love to see you present. Do you ever just have to go into song at some point, or just hold it back?
Funny enough, well, first of all, I hold it. Yes, I've been holding it back my entire life, guys. Let's just be honest. It's what I'm doing. But no, I think I break into song more. I can tell you two quick things on that. The first is, yes, I break into song. In fact, I have my executive vice president and I have worked together for 10 years. It'll be 11 in January. She's the best. And at some point I was driving with her, maybe it's year 2, because you've worked together and you're all very stiff in year 1 and 2. Hello, nice to hello. And she looks at me, I'm driving somewhere to a client meeting, and she says, do you know you sing all the time? And I was turning, going boop boop boop, just turning the car and moving. And I had no idea. So I guess I think I'm holding it back, but I'm really not.
We are two peas.
Yep.
You know this, Greg. It's one of the key elements of my wife and I, who is our producer, Lisa Bender. One of the keys to our relationship was she didn't mind me singing in the car. That would have been a deal breaker. So
good job, Lisa.
Right.
Awesome. So yes, your career trajectory is fascinating to me. We had the chance to speak before the podcast, and your experience also includes working in the hospitality industry as a server and a manager. And I mentioned to you that I worked in that industry for a long time, so I know, it's a physically demanding job. I mean, you have to have great social skills, and there's a lot more to it than people I think appreciate a lot of times. Yeah. And what was amazing to me is on your LinkedIn, you went from working in the hospitality industry to landing a job as an account manager at the 3rd largest PR firm in the world. I was like, holy cow, that is just, that is amazing. So how did you accomplish that? How did you translate those skills into getting, and I know the PR firm is, it's a blue chip. And how did you get in there and get that job at that stage?
Thank you for that question, because it makes me feel really good. It's a really cool thought, I think that I want to answer it by saying you brought up something important in the question, which is to say it looks really amazing on LinkedIn, because it's like, oh, wow, she literally went just from this to this. But I want to point out that during that time, it did not feel like that. And that's a big piece of my message for the whole world. I call my message confidently walking in the wrong direction, because so many times you have to trust your intuition, and your intuition says, go here, but everything else is like, this feels wrong. And it felt weird to me. I was coming out of theater. I didn't know what I wanted to do, but I knew that I needed something different than theater. To be perfectly honest, I just moved to Paris. I wanted to eat croissants and drink wine, but I'm not someone who could just let myself do that. So I went to graduate school, and that's really the story. So I found a graduate school program in global communications in Paris. That's where I wanted to be. I went and did that. One of my teachers there had worked at Hill & Knowlton, not currently, but in her past. And then once I had moved, I met a boy, and the boy.
Oh my gosh. You got a romantic plot twist, Bender. Nice.
I met a boy. Exactly. There's always a romantic plot twist. But I got out to California, and there were no jobs. It was the Great Recession, and there was nothing. And I'm sitting here thinking, I've just invested in a grad school degree and taken out debt, and I was an actress, so I don't have savings, like, what am I going to do? And so I interviewed and I interviewed and I interviewed and I talked to people. Like, it was not like an easy, like I walked in and they picked me. It was like I really had to figure it out. And finally, what I did was I found this job at Hill & Knowlton. I remembered my teacher had worked there. I wrote and asked her, would you write someone in the local office? And that's the only way I ever broke through. So it was a lot of clawing.
Yeah. But also a lot of, what we talk about, which is credentialed, but relationship building, right? The old phrase was, of course, it's not what you know, it's who you know, kind of thing. But I think it's a little different now. I think you have to have that credential, but in addition to that, you still have to have that relationship built. And that was a nice one for you to go back to, it sounds.
Yeah, just pure guts for me. And I told Jenn when we were talking about this before the podcast that the only other, or a similar career change that I admired, and we both know there's a female comedian named Angela Johnson, and before she was a stand-up comic, she was a cheerleader for the Los Angeles Raiders. It's like, holy moly, talk about the pivot.
Skills, like skills all around.
Right.
But don't we all have to pivot at some point? I mean, it does really matter. We're just, these are pretty dramatic examples, but
Mm-hmm.
I think for anybody who moves through the leadership ladder, there's a pivot involved. So it's nice to hear about that. Now, your next career move though was to go to the Smart Agency, where you rose through the ranks, vice president, managing director to president, and then you acquired the firm in 2018. Tell us about the Smart Agency and what distinguishes your firm from other businesses in the commercial real estate and financial services industries.
I love that question because it's what we constantly are working on. And so there's nothing like being asked about your passion. I think what really distinguishes us is the fact that we exist to advance this industry. As I grew up in the ranks of marketing firms and PR firms, often you are ancillary to the industry and you feed off of it in a bit of a different way. Our firm is really integrated and exists solely for this one particular niche industry. And I think that just heard something recently. They said, oh, I'm not going to be able to think of the right expression, but it was just about the power of being niche. And I think that that's what we bring is a real understanding. When you have a business that is highly regulated and really complex, and actually, I might even go as far as to say complicated, Phil. Like,
Yeah,
I think commercial real estate
there you go.
is pretty complicated. And,
Right.
and I think it's hard to know who to trust, and how do you do that? So I think that what we've done is we've built a culture of trust, and that centers on, and again, I'll go back to things your listeners care about, which is kind of culture building and leadership. And I think
Right.
it really centers on getting that shared ownership around that mission. I think it centers on, we have a school program. Once a week, we do CRE school. Every week, we are interacting with trends, talking about trends, focused only on commercial real estate. I think it has to do with some of the partnerships that we've created with some of the big global organizations like Urban Land Institute, Commercial Real Estate Women, and things like that. But overarching, I think what we do is we are a commercial real estate company. We just do communications, So we are swimming with everybody, and I think that makes a big difference.
Interesting. And so thinking about that though, I mean, as you make these moves and progress and build this culture, what was, maybe just to add into this, what was a unique moment maybe for you where you were able to say, okay, I am the leader here. This is the culture I want to build.
Ooh, I got a good one for you. So it's a good. I like that question. So I acquired this agency in 2018, and it was from a wonderful, wonderful woman who had started the firm in 1994, and she had such a strong vision and a strong name, and she had gone out and pounded these streets, and I have so much respect for her. And so when I acquired it, it was 2018, and I thought that it was my job to build her firm still, because I'd worked for her for 10 years. We were partners. We knew and so it was really, and frankly, from 2018, and then we all had 2019, which felt like the world was like, for me, it was
Ending,
like
right.
19 actually was wonderful. That's what I mean. 19 was amazing. Like everybody's like killing it and business is coming. And then here comes 2020 and you get like everybody sliced down. We saw a lot of constriction in budget.
Interesting.
We saw a lot of that. And that was the moment. And I remember I kind of woke up and I thought, you know what? We need to be ride or die for commercial real estate. And you couldn't use that expression in 2020. So I did not, as a good leader wouldn't.
Right.
But I felt in my body and in my mind, like I need to commit myself to something, because if I'm just doing this for money, if I'm just doing this to keep this business profitable, why would I do this? That doesn't excite me. What excites me is growing something and helping these companies. And I was watching these people we're working with stressing out, not knowing how to keep their companies going when they can't keep deals going. So I think it was in that moment, it was that 2020, everything shifted, that I thought, you know what, I have something to do here. And it gave me a bit of a purpose.
Well, and you know what? And that's right, because in commercial real estate, there was that delay. There's a lot of buildings that became condos, right? And so it was, that was a tough stretch. I really didn't think about that till you brought it back up.
Yeah. And I love the way you phrased it, that you wanted to be a champion for, the industry. There is a marketing guy named Scott Bedbury, who's like one of my Mount Rushmore heroes. And he wrote a book And in the book, he was saying that as a savvy marketer and as a company, you need, and he phrased it, he said, you need to be the protagonist for your category. And he talked about yes. And he talked, and there's a little theater thing I did there.
That. Yeah, I know. I saw him on stage, Greg. I love it.
Oh, okay. Yeah. And he said, in the early going, like Starbucks was the protagonist for the coffee category, that people weren't, you didn't think of spending that much money on, that they just elevated the experience of it. But I love the way, you phrased that. So the one question that I was dying to ask, as you mentioned, you lived in Paris and you gave a TEDx talk at the American University in Paris called A Guide to Navigating Change with Confidence, where you shared specific strategies for facing change, communicating clearly, and continuing to walk while making a positive impact on your journey. And you had mentioned earlier that one of the themes was confidently walking in the wrong direction. So could you expand on this? What do you mean by that? And how did you get the opportunity to do a TED Talk? That's gold standard.
The bomb, yeah.
Thank you very much. Let me start with confidently walking in the wrong direction, because it's the coolest, most fun thing in my own head, because every time I say it, I'm like, you shouldn't be saying that. No one wants to walk in the wrong direction, right? So, but it feels it feels so perfect to what it is that I am continually working to express. And I feel like it is a thematic idea for all the work I'm doing at the Smart Agency through this. I mentioned to you, Greg, I'm doing a musical album. Everything I'm doing, I'm trying to get people to remember that there is this really strong inner source inside, and that I'll use the metaphor like a sea captain, since we talked about you guys in your boat, that sometimes you're in the storm and you're like, dude, we got to get out of this storm. I hate this storm. Like, it's killing my sails. It's breaking everything down. But your inner self is like, nope, got to walk through it. And there's something that feels to me far away, but I'm not a researcher, but just as a leader, as a business person, as an artist, as a wife, as an aunt, it feels to me like people have lost that belief that they can find it in themselves, and they're looking for it on their phones, and they're looking for it in AI, and all of those are beautiful tools. But if you don't have that anchor, if you don't have that ability to go, we're driving through this storm, then how will this next generation of businesses get off the ground? So it feels important to me. And that's really the confidently walking in the wrong direction, is being able to recognize that it feels wrong, but do it anyway, and do it with confidence.
Wow.
And isn't that, when it's all said and done, isn't that the entrepreneur's creed? Confidently walking in the wrong direction. I mean, really,
so can
right?
I quote you on that? May I quote you on that? Thank you. I would love for it to be the entrepreneur's creed. Yes.
That's the Sea Captain original, free of charge. Because gosh, my whole career at Mizzou as an undergrad, Greg knows this, was confidently walking in the wrong direction, and somehow you end up making it. Sea Captain's built on that. The amount of times people tell you wrong direction,
yeah,
and what do you end up doing? You end up saying, nope, I think this is the right way. So I love that. I think that's that's a keeper.
Yeah, we had not too long ago, we had a young writer on the podcast named Adam Noor, and he's a prolific LinkedIn poster, and he just had a post this week, and the gist of it was around risk taking, and essentially he said, be brave enough to suck at something for the first time. And next, and then you'll eventually get it. So awesome. And so then, can I ask you about how did you get to do the TED Talk?
I forgot that part. Yeah.
Yes. No, my pleasure. And that's one of those things. Okay. So the answer really is, like, a friend sent me an email that my alma mater, American University of Paris, was putting on the TEDx. They used to do it. Then they stopped during the pandemic and they started again. And I had a friend emailed me and say, hey, you should do this. Okay. So that would be the easy story. But here's the truth of it, being a leader and doing those things. I was ready, and I didn't even know it, because several years prior, I had started thinking about, like, how am I going to keep myself having original thought when my job is writing everyone else's thoughts? right? Like I am an interpreter and communicator for clients. So how do I keep myself going? So I started a speech series, and I started with myself giving speeches, and then I opened that out, and now my team gives speeches on an annual basis. Well, because of that, I had already begun conceptualizing this thought. So when this email arrived and they said, hey, the deadline's in like 4 days and you have to submit a draft of your talk, I had a starting point. So I think that would be my, I have a lot of people kind of ask like, hey, how did you get that? And the getting it is like, honestly, that was like, thank you, universe. But the really being selected to do it, it would be, if you would like to do a TEDx, if that's something you want, start talking now. Start building a speech, get an audience, film yourself, put it up. Like I wasn't picked out because of that, but I was ready because of that.
Interesting. Yeah. So that is really well said. Well said. So now you have a podcast now called Resiliency, the podcast, where you share stories, strategies, and inspiration on how to embrace change, overcome challenges, redefine resilience in today's ever-evolving world. Tell us more about the podcast and your inspiration behind it.
Of course. Honestly, the TEDx was the inspiration. So the TEDx event was called Redefining Resilience, and it was all centered on resilience. And there were 9 speakers, and each one had a different story of resilience. And when we went in for the technical rehearsal, the full day, I was able to sit, and it was me, my husband, Asif, and then one of the other speakers. She was the keynote speaker. Her name is Dr. Kelly Culver. We all sat and watched every speech, and we all just became overwhelmed by each one of these very different perspectives that was giving us information that really ties back to what you just said, the entrepreneur's creed of how do you keep walking when you have faced things like, abuse, when you faced things like queerness and trauma. There were just all these different really cool topics. So all this to say, we all felt inspired. It was brought up while we were there. Hey, we should do a podcast. And then I jumped to, there are dreams and then there's execution, right? So I think when we were all together, there was the dream, there will be a podcast, and we hope. And then we went home, and my husband, Asif, sat down. He's a corporate communicator, many, many, many years, and now a creative writer and we have a creative company. And he sat down and he wrote a treatment for the podcast. And that really was what made it happen. So he took on the role of executive director. I'm a co-host with Dr. Kelly Culver. She has a PhD in strategic resilience from the Paris School of Business. So it makes us a cool combo because I'm, the loudmouth frog. And then she's a beautifully well-researched, well-honed Canadian. And so we really just work to pull out good stories of resilience so that people can learn how to take on life and still enjoy it.
I love it. I love it. And, it's interesting, Greg, sort of, your husband sort of was like Greg. That's what Greg did. I said, remember we talked, I said, I want to do a podcast, and Greg's like, I got it. And then of course he does, as you've come to find, the interviewing he does is on another level to really get to know the people who are coming on here, and it shows in the strength of the podcast.
Oh, shucks, Phil.
Yeah. And
I'm Phil's work husband. I forgot to tell you.
and you know what's so funny? The whole time Greg's going, what? He's going to take a shot at me.
Yep, I was waiting for him to wind up about my romantic life, and then he pivoted on me and turned it into a compliment.
And it was a compliment, and it's heartfelt. Greg, why don't you ramp up with this this last question?
Yeah, we had to ask this last one. So you mentioned you grew up in a family of musicians in North Carolina, and your family had its own television show.
Woo!
Oh my God! Okay.
Bomb.
Yeah, and so you are a jazz vocalist, and you just finished an album of jazz standards in collaboration with your dad, called Love in All of Its Forms, that's going to be released later in 2024. So we got to hear about the television show, and then tell us about the inspiration for doing the album and what it was like to get to work with your dad.
the experience was magic, magic, and magic. I had not been doing music. I had been very focused only on the Smart Agency, to the extent, and again, you kind of asked me earlier, Phil, like, at what point did you feel like you wanted to take it as your own? 2020 was one of those. But also at that time when I kind of realized I can't just do this for the P&L, like that can't be it. I have to have a purpose. I think I also recognized, hey, there's this artist that's coming out of me that's always been in me, and I got to let her sing too. Like I can't just be the business. I have to be real, and this is really who I am. And so then it comes down to my dad, who's the sweetest person in the world. And what happened is I realized he's going to be 80 years old next year. And I thought, well, Jenn, and he's the pianist. He's a pianist, beautiful pianist. And I was like, if you're going to do it, you better do it. So all that to say, we hooked up with an incredible studio called Liminal. It's LMNL Studios in Santa Monica. They're phenomenal. They connected us with some incredible musicians. I will just say out loud that so we have 3 other collaborators. Jeff Babko, who is the pianist on Jimmy Kimmel Live, and he is currently playing for Steve Martin and Martin Short, and he's the piano player on Encanto. And then Sean Hurley, who plays with John Mayer and Alicia Keys and Idina Menzel, a bunch of people we know. And then Zach Danziger, who's a drummer, and he's known for contributing to scores of movies like Ocean's 11 and Iron Man. So these are like amazing people that we got to hook up with. And then I got to be with my dad in a studio doing this music. It's a dream come true.
Yeah. Well, if you need an entourage, Phil and I are available. Let me get my head in the ring for when you're next party.
Next party. What were you
No, that's special. Oh my gosh. That talk about name dropping. I lost count.
Me too. Look, and the coolest things is these dudes are the coolest people. They don't act like they are like the chillest dudes in the world. But I want to say this really quick. I think it's really important for the episode for why, maybe why I'm a guest today. Phil, you said earlier, the old adage is it's who you know. Right. And I think that was true. I would change that in the 2020s. It's who you ask.
Oh, good one. Yes, 100%.
Because, what happened is I understood that I wanted to do this thing with my dad. And then I got put on a phone call with this guy from a studio, not because I was looking for it, because something else related to PR, related to something else. And I asked. I waited, I stayed on the call, and I said, sir, can I just ask you about my own project? So, and it's back to, you asked, how'd you go from hospitality to Hill and Knowlton? I asked. So you have to make the ask.
Yeah. And that's right in line. Another Sea Captain pro tip. You don't get anything in this world unless you ask for it.
Yeah.
And that's just a great example. So fun as we put a bow on this. First of all, what a pleasure today. I thank you, Chris George. If we didn't ask him about who he might want to put on a podcast, we don't meet Jenn Quader. So there's a great example. Right. Last thing I'll touch on with you is when I ran my firm, you'll love this. When we would have meetings, big meetings, 300, 400 people in them, and we'd have an intermission. Okay. And then in the middle of the meeting, and then we'd come back, and you know how it is when people come back, they're talking, they're not focused, they're unruly. They're, you're sitting in the microphone and you can't get them back in. I just started singing, just a small town girl living in a lonely world, took the midnight train going anywhere. Right.
Yes.
And everybody would stop, look up, sit down, and then I'd say, let's get started with the second half of the meeting.
Yeah.
So there's a little pro tip for you.
The first person we've had dance on the podcast.
And the first answer, yes.
So that's the highlight reel for social media, please.
So Jenn, you alluded to it a little bit as we wrap today, but how do people get in touch with Jenn Quader? They want to meet Jenn Quader. They want to do business with Jenn. How do they get a hold of you?
Thank you, Phil. You can reach me. I am Jenn with 2 N's, JENNQUADER. So I'm at Jenn Quader on all the socials, LinkedIn and Instagram and Facebook and everything. You can find me at thesmartagency.com. You can find me at jennquader.com. So I'm everywhere. But I'd love to talk to you. Yeah. So feel free to reach out.
What a special talent. This was a real gem. Great job, Greg and Lisa, putting this all together. Greg, any final thought?
No, thanks so much. What a delight to get to meet you. If your mic wasn't on that stand, you could drop it. But thanks so much. It was really, really fun talking to you. And I hope we get a chance to chat again soon.
Thanks for joining us for this edition of the Sea Captain Way podcast. If you found the conversation valuable, please like, share, and post a review on your favorite podcast app.
To learn more about Sea Captain and its performance coaching programs, visit us at seacaptaincoaching.com. The link is in the show notes. You can also follow us at Sea Captain Coaching on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. Thanks again for listening.
Wishing you fair winds and a following sea on your journey.